I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN. We're a nonprofit that presents programming exploring human development across the lifespan. I'm honored to welcome you to tonight's conversation between Mr. David Montero and Professor Michael Eric Dyson. You actually see them on screen right now. Thanks for joining us tonight. Our YouTube channel has an archive of over 300 videos of past events, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates when new recordings are posted. And now for introductions. Michael Eric Dyson is University Distinguished Professor at Vanderbilt University, where he holds positions in both the College of Arts and Science and the Divinity School. He has authored over 25 books, including 7 New York Times bestsellers, and has won numerous awards for his literary contributions, including the 2020 Langston Hughes Medal and 2 NAACP Image Awards. His book, The Black Presidency, Barack Obama and the Politics of Race in America, was a finalist for the 2016 Kirkus Prize, and his New York Times bestseller, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America, was a finalist for the 2018 Southern Book Prize. Joining him, our special guest tonight, David Montero, is a journalist and producer. His new book, The Stolen Wealth of Slavery, A Case for Reparations, with a foreword by Professor Dyson, traces how white corporate directors and Wall Street magnates plowed the wealth they stole from the labor and life of enslaved Black people, the equivalent today of trillions of dollars, into modern industries and corporations that built America. How they did so utilizing many of Wall Street's biggest banks before, during, and after the Civil War, and why corporate reparations and radical reparative justice are critically necessary. Formerly a correspondent for the Christian Science Monitor and a regular producer for PBS's flagship investigative series, Frontline, his work has twice been honored with an Emmy Award nomination, as well as the South Asian Journalist Association's Daniel Pearl Award. We are honored and such a pleasure to welcome both David Montero and Michael Eric Dyson.
Well, thank you for that gracious introduction. And of course, for Brother Montero, we're here tonight. We're going to discuss at length the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. Right? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong. Okay. My bad.
I have notes.
Wait a minute. If you buy 2 to 3 copies of Montero's book, we will talk about Kendrick and Drake in the after party, right? But you gotta buy 2 to 3 copies. If you buy 5 copies, we're gonna break the whole beef down. We'll go song by song and lyric by lyric. But you gotta buy books, all right? So
it's a good deal.
Brother Montero, good to see you, my friend. I want to thank you for writing this book. They announced the Pulitzer Prizes today. My friend Jonathan Ike won one for his book on King. I want you to win one next year for this book, Stolen Wealth of Slavery, because it is an amazing book. It's an astonishing book. It's beautifully researched. It's eloquently written. It's incredibly elegantly argued. And nothing could be more timely. And you're joining together history and politics and economics and social analysis in a seamless body of words that are nothing short of remarkable. So I just want to, just as a fan and as a critic and as an author and as a Black person in America, I just want to give you thanks, my brother.
Well, that means so much to me, and I have to thank you for writing such a devastatingly beautiful foreword, which was so inspiring, so beautifully written. I'm so honored and humbled by those words that you wrote, so thank you.
Bless you, my man. Well, I meant every word, and let's jump right into it because I want the people to get a sense of this. You know, I learned so much reading your book. I was like, man, I didn't know this. Oh, wow. Okay. So let's look at the broad picture here. You know, when people hear slavery, they think the Southern white bigots down here beating up on Black people. It's enough of that. And putting whelps on their bodies and, you know, having these big mansions and Gone with the Wind. Well, the end when they ain't got no money. Maybe that's true. But all of the phantasmagorical delusions we have about enslavement, notwithstanding, you kind of deconstruct that stuff. And you show us that, you know, something that others have pointed out, that, you know, most of these plantations weren't big old plantations. Some of them were in the urban situation. They're doing all kind of complicated work. All right. Black people getting passes, they're blacksmiths, all that stuff, right? But what you do so brilliantly, you shift the focus, the locus classicus, onto the North, where ostensibly all of the big cat liberals are up there, promoting the freedom of Black people. And you were blowing my mind. Like, yeah, even the people who were like for the anti-slavery society and stuff they were doing, they were still deriving economic benefit from slavery. All right, so that's getting ahead of the story. So give us the broad stroke here. Your shift of geographies from the South, although you pay copious attention and detail to that, but to the North, where economic institutions, financial institutions, took broad and deep advantage of the enslavement of Black flesh to create enormous wealth up North that really showed that the greatest beneficiaries of enslavement weren't the fat cats down in the South, because there weren't a whole bunch of fat cats, enough of them, but the ones up North who are ostensibly liberal, who were getting paid off of the enterprise. Just back up and give us a kind of broad overview of the necessity to shift paradigms and to shift focus from the South to the North and what was going on in enslavement.
Yeah, thank you for that. What I wanted to do in this book is really understand enslavement from the perspective of the wealth. So who really made the money through enslavement? And, as I started off in this research, I naturally started looking in the South, right? Because that's the normal narrative we're given. And the documentation, the records, the abolitionist newspapers that I kept coming across, they were all pointing to the North and saying enslavement is benefiting a very few number of people in the South, white enslavers, and the profits are flowing to the North. And so the more I looked at this story, the story of enslavement and who was making the money, the more I realized the Black people were enslaved in record numbers in the South, but what they produced in the form of cotton and sugar and other things, that wealth, and then the profits were all going to the North. Right. And why? Because they were sailing on ships that Northerners owned. The financing, slavery was expensive, and the financing from slavery was coming from the North. So it was a cycle of loans and debt going to the South, goods flowing to the North. So it really opened my eyes that we have to shift the lens if we want to understand who really is making the money from the system. We have to shift it to the North.
Right. Yeah. The South might have been selling the drugs, but the people who were pushing them and bringing them over were up North. Okay, sorry for that banal analogy there. But what, did you, when you went into it, you've already indicated, but give us a bit more of an analysis or at least a reflection on your process. When you went into it, were you like the rest of us? Well, the South is the one who was making the dough. They're the ones reaping the benefit, the enormous financial windfall that befell them. Were you like the rest of us? And at what point did it blow your mind to go, wait, what? I mean, how? So A, did you go in it like the rest of us? B, when you found out about, what is it that inspired you or instigated your analytical acuity to be brought to scrutinize the North in such a way that you found out this stuff in the first place? That's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Well, yes, I started off like, as you say, the rest of us with the conventional story about slavery. So it's something that happened in the South and stayed in the South, and profits were made in the South. So I very much came to it with that outlook. And what I wanted to do was find particular Southern enslaving families, white families, whose wealth remained up until today, right? So I started trying to make a list of what are the big families, and where's their wealth today? What happened to the plantations, let alone the people that they enslaved? And the more I started trying to compile that list, the harder it became. There were a few, yes, as you mentioned, the 1% of slave-owning families in the South, they had generational wealth, it lasted, etc. No denying that. But I kept coming across references to banks, to individuals on Wall Street, to the shipping companies that were transporting cotton. And I started saying, I really need to start focusing in on these individuals. And that's when a kind of, I had maybe like a transformative experience in the research. I discovered that at the New York Public Library were 326 boxes of business records belonging to a man named Moses Taylor.
Mm.
Moses Taylor was one of the most important directors of Citibank in the antebellum period. Suddenly, I found myself saying, I now realize that to tell the story of enslavement, I'm not talking about somebody in the South. I'm talking about, it blew my mind. I'm talking about a guy who sat on Wall Street 1,000 miles away and was the director of a very powerful bank that we all know about today. Those records showed how intermingled his business operations and the operations of Citibank were with Southern slavery. So that was the turning point for me to say, well, if this guy exists, Moses Taylor, and he has 326 boxes at the New York Public Library, what other people exist? So I started really focusing on the names of particular corporate directors, whether they were bank directors or insurance directors or shipping magnates sitting in the North. And you know what? A lot of their records exist, and they show how they were loaning money to plantations, how they were reaping the ill harvest of enslavement and shipping it north and then to the world. So once I found Moses Taylor and realized there's so many of these guys, it's endless. The number of characters who, by the way, were also, the biggest philanthropists of their day. They were making art collections that were turned into museums. They were getting rich from enslavement, though having nothing to do with the day-to-day management of plantations. Once I realized all these people are out there, just to add to that, I discovered a second thing. Abolitionist newspapers at the time in the 1830s were all talking about this. They were saying, if you want to understand enslavement, its roots are in the North. The financing is coming from the North. And that again blew my mind as I followed that trail deeper and deeper.
Right. Well, see, that leads to this question. Now, I'm not a historian, though I read a lot of history. But the thing is, we've had some great histories of enslavement, and we've had, epical paradigm shifting analyses of enslavement, new literature that has enlightened us about the habits, traditions, folkways, mores, all that stuff. But dang, have you, I ain't never come across a book like yours where I'm like, dude, I'm pretty well read on this stuff. I ain't seen nothing like this. So if the abolitionist newspapers of the day are broadcasting this, why have not historians and other journalists and literary, theorists and writers done what you've done? Because you've done it. Now, it's not that it's interchangeable, because what you did is remarkable. But why is there no curiosity? Was there no indication that this was the case? Explain to us the lacuna, the gulf, the gap in the kind of historical research as to why this is such a ground clearing book.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. I too was baffled by this fact. We have amazing histories of enslavement. I felt that they tend to talk about the role of the northern financing in passing.
Right.
The question of why, that is a good question. I'm still grappling with it myself. Why? I think in part it's because the narrative is so ironclad and so monolithic that slavery took place in the South. And it is an amazing thing to behold that it has gone unquestioned for a very long time. People have mentioned it, as you pointed out, historians have mentioned it. But in researching this book said, well, why are they mentioning it always like a few pages it's mentioned and then we move on to somewhere else? I think maybe also I'm an investigative journalist, and the maxim of investigative journalism is follow the money.
Right.
And, I had written a book before this about money laundering, and I was sort of trained into having that framework, follow the money. I think that's something that historians don't do. They don't follow the money. They look at things in a different way. And so when I applied that to the story of enslavement, it just opened up new doors. But yeah, I agree with you. Again, if you go back to that time, it is undeniable how much the North was being called out by abolitionists for being the bastion and the financing center for enslavement.
Right. And well, you give legs to that, you give flesh to that, and in astonishing detail. A kind of ethnographic study of the folkways and mores of these figures. You do kind of brief historical overviews of these families, and you dig deep into the resources from one generation to another. And I'm sitting there thinking, all these arguments about, oh, that's slavery, that's a long time ago, you people get over it, forget you, it's a long time ago, you're just trying to pimp slavery. And here you are literally enunciating and articulating in breathtaking detail the astonishing complicity of the financial institutions of America, the leading ones, Bank of America, Citibank, all of them, with their dirty hands and bloodied money, contributing to the lifeblood and the circulation of enslavement, the capital that sustained it, the ideological apparatuses that were fed into it. I mean, come out of, as you said, philanthropic-oriented figures who are ostensibly committed to the erasure and eradication of enslavement, on the other hand, sustaining it and deriving benefit from it, right? That's just amazing. So talk to us about that essential contradiction. Gunnar Myrdal speaks about it, the American dilemma. You got an ideal of democracy, but your practices undercut it. Talk to us about this kind of division between, on the one hand, a commitment to liberty and emancipation, and identification with those, and at the same time reaping big paper, big money from the enterprise of enslavement.
Yeah, I talk about in the book, as you point out, wherever I can, I try to name names, because I didn't know, again, I wanted this to be concrete white men who we can name and whose names we actually already know. So for example, to answer your question, I talk about one individual, Archibald Gracie, who epitomizes everything that you're talking about. He was considered an exemplar of the New Republic's ideals of democracy and mercantilism. And on the one hand, he's espousing these very high-minded thoughts. On the other, he enslaved 5 people in his mansion, Gracie Mansion, which today, of course, is the mayor of New York's public residence.
Right.
Gracie, Black people's enslavement was indispensable to his wealth. He shipped the goods that they made all over the world. He financed enslavement. He became the director of a bank because of this wealth. In his home, he enslaved 5 Black people. But as you pointed out, with the money he was making from enslavement, while saying all these things about liberty, he was also giving money to the Manumission Society of New York and for quote unquote free Black schools in New York. So, total hypocrisy. And I think what he epitomizes is the North's hypocritical complicity in this whole thing. They could benefit enormously from enslavement, merchants like this, while facing none of the censure. Right. All the censure, all the program was heaped on people in the South because, that's where the plantations are. Well, actually, people like Archibald Gracie, and remember, he was one of dozens in an elite circle in New York and in Boston. They were actually profiting from enslavement at a much more insidious and huge level, but not getting their hands dirty, so to speak, in the everyday management of this disgusting system. So, yeah, I mean, and these are, Archibald Gracie's closest friends were Alexander Hamilton and, John Jay, who, yes, enslaved many Black people, profited from, I point out in the book, a scholar has pointed out that Alexander Hamilton personally profited by lending out an enslaved boy for labor. So, these were the exemplars of democracy and our ideals, but yeah.
Right.
Well,
yeah, no. And it's astonishing. It's well detailed. It's empirical. It can be checked against the record, and you got it all right there. Couple of things. So on the one hand, then, if during that time, the abolitionist newspapers knew what was going on, they wanted the jig to be up, but it was still ongoing. Was there any resentment of the Southern, barons and merchants of, enslavement? And, look, y'all are up here making all the dough. We're taking all the heat down here. Yeah. What was the relationship, intramurally between those two contesting parties.
Yeah, it was heated. It was heated. I mean, from a very early period in the 1820s, you can start to read in Southern newspapers a growing resentment, a hot hatred for the North. Why? Because the Southern enslavers knew the people in the North sitting on Wall Street and at the banks of Boston, we're taking all their loans and they're freely giving them. Okay, we are complicit because we're taking the loans. But these guys are throwing so much money into enslavement, and they're carrying the bulk of the goods that are being produced on plantations on their ships, and they're charging us a fee. They're charging us to store it. They're charging us to insure the cotton. They're charging us when it gets to New York to unload it, to bale it, to ship it off to England. I mean, it was not exactly a legitimate argument that the South had, because they were willingly doing this, and this is how Southern plantation owners could get their goods from the interior deep in a place like Mississippi to a thriving world market like England. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that antipathy started from a very early period, and you have Southerners and newspapers saying things like the Northern capitalists are sucking the lifeblood of our commerce. Well, their commerce being, the enslavement of Black people. But so, there was smoke rising, from a very early period that shows, why we ended up in the devastation of 1865 in a civil war.
Right. No, and I think about this, and I can't help but rush ahead a few centuries to January 6th, where you got this kind of outrage about the system. And we can all, when I say we can all, those of us who are critical look at it and go like, y'all are making stuff up, but we understand, your sense of loss, but your sense of loss is premised upon and predicated on, having already delegitimized an entire population of people trying to snatch the vote, gerrymandering, rejiggering, all that stuff. But in this case, it's not that typical, oh, well, it's the Southern whites are just bitching and complaining. They actually got a point. They got a big point. And what did that do for, American society and culture as we're trying to both reconcile this behemoth brutality of enslavement? And, early on, Abraham Lincoln and others are like, yeah, I would, I could save the Union if I could, but this thing is really tearing us up. What are we going to do about it? So it became increasingly a problem that had to be addressed, and yet deriving such enormous benefit from it. It just made me think again, it was even far more difficult to try to part ways with a system that they were addicted to, because they were dependent upon that. They were enslaved, they were slaves to their own, domination of an entire population and the economic remuneration that they derived from it.
Yeah, an important point. Adding fuel to this fire we're talking about. The South is upset with the quote unquote North. But let's not forget, as I try to point out in the book, these Southern enslavers had incredibly vocal supporters in corporate directors on Wall Street. Yeah. So, what I try to document in the book is that those corporate directors whose bread and butter was enslavement, was Black people's exploitation, they would not be rich. The banks of Wall Street would not have the huge deposits they did then and now were not for the system of enslavement in the South. Those corporate directors were among the most outspoken white nationalists fighting to defend slavery from Wall Street. And so we're talking about how the country gets pushed to this, civil war. Wall Street was just as much to blame for that. Corporate directors, Moses Taylor, the Citibank director I mentioned before, he organized rallies of tens of thousands of white men on the streets of New York to fight for slavery, not against slavery. And to fight for the white race if it came to a war which they believed was going to happen between white people and Black people. Mm-hmm. They did that. They pushed the country as much to a conflagration and a civil war as the Southern enslavers did, and they had as much of an interest, as you're pointing out. It was their wealth. It was their well-being. So, yeah, I mean, that is also counterintuitive to the narrative that we tell, right? That the North was against enslavement and fighting for abolition. Actually, no. Tens of thousands of the founding fathers of corporate America were fighting for slavery and stoking what would become civil war.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Well, when we look at the economic infrastructure of enslavement, the benefits that were derived, they were, of course, enormous wealth, but also the kind of folklore that attaches to it, notions of character, habits, dispositions, the very being, the ontological, to use a big, ridiculous word here drawn from philosophy, but the being of people and the kind of collective character. Black people as lazy, white people as industrious. I'm like, dude, where were you for a couple centuries there when you missed out on what was going on? We're looking for overtime right now.
Yeah.
But the thing is that when people hear these arguments, and then they're connected to reparations, well, reparations will break us. They will break the bank. They will just put the nation in a bad place. We can't even have conversations, right? Panels to study it, licensed by, impaneled by Congress to say, let's even study this stuff, right? What is it about the enormous wealth and the possibility of economic wherewithal and the enormous financial windfall attached to enslavement, and the fact that now there's a refusal even to acknowledge it, don't want to own up to it, don't want to come into an awareness of what it is. I think about, all of these banning of books and trying to keep people from knowing stuff. Talk to us about the kind of philosophical and cultural consequences of the implications of the work that you're doing in terms of knowing it, acknowledging it, and therefore having to do something about it.
One of the reasons I think, well, there are many reasons that white people especially, twist the issue of reparations up into knots, right? But one of them is, again, a myth that persists, that the wealth of slavery was confined to the South, and by the time of the Civil War, it sort of evaporated in the conflict, such that 1865 is this line after which no wealth crosses. And, there's no wealth to speak of, almost as if enslavement never happened, right? All the wealth is gone with the wind. So, what do we even have to make redress for? And by the way, there's no wealth to do it with. It was owned by the plantation owners, and it's gone. What I'm trying to do in the book, in addition to shifting the focus of the tale we tell ourselves as a country about enslavement, shift it from the South to the North, is shift it across time. Because in following the people that I do, the white men on Wall Street that I do, what I'm also trying to show is how they invested the money that they made. Right. And that's important because it shows that the wealth from enslavement not only traveled from South to North, it never died. It was transmuted into railroads and into investment banks, into infrastructure, into real estate, into millions and millions of things. That wealth still exists all around us. And so what I'm trying to do in the book is change people's perception that this wealth is, you can't just minimize the concept of reparations by saying that, well, that was something that took place in the South and it happened a long time ago. No, it took place actually more, if we're speaking about the profits, in the North, and it is wealth that still exists. So we have to grapple with that argument, and we have to be willing to see that it is wealth that we're all still benefiting from today.
Right. Well, that's an important point. Let's talk more about that, because the argument is that was a long time ago. Like you said, it was in a particular region. It was kind of, quarantined to that arena. That stuff is evaporated, and what's the argument? The Civil War was the payback of, white people who defended Black people and got them out of slavery. Bro, stop revisionist historiography. But having said that, today, the beneficiaries of enslavement continue to exist in this culture and in identifiable form. That's the brilliance of your book, and the ultimate utility is that you are naming names and talking about lineages and traditions and investments of enormous capital that have derived enormous benefit for Citibank, Bank of America. I mean, you just name them. Talk to us about why that's important, because the argument has been that we can't, get hold of that. That stuff is gone. the beneficiaries are now moved on. There's nobody in this country that owned a slave. That's the big thing now. Yeah, none of my people, we didn't own slaves, or we weren't here. We came in later. And I tell people, well, damn, you weren't here when the Supreme Court was made, but if you got an issue, you go to the Supreme Court. What the hell? Right? You weren't even here when you were born. Your mama and daddy created you. But anyway, I digress. So talk to us about that, all right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's, what I try to point out with these particular figures that we keep coming back to is how they created the wealth and the systems of wealth making that we're all still enjoying today, right? I mean, these bank directors on Wall Street, they didn't just personally enrich themselves. They created a system where it was okay to exploit Black people for profit. And they created an ethos that was then passed down to the people who became the arbiters of big business and JP Morgan. And so, you can very concretely trace how many institutions, financial institutions in America and families would not be as wealthy as they are today if it were not for this diabolical system. And it is true. No one alive today is responsible personally for enslavement. That does not mean the United States is innocent. It is a system that we are all still benefiting from and claiming citizenship to. And so, it's like a corrupt corporation. You're a shareholder of a corrupt corporation. You may not have personally been involved in the corruption, but you're benefiting from the corruption. You could say, well, I didn't know that the corporation was going to do X, Y, and Z abroad. Well, but you're happily taking the dividends, right? So the United States is a similar legal entity. And just to drill down, I think this idea that, we can't really wrap our head around reparations today. I want to just mention one story, and it's about a particular family, the Hillman family of Pittsburgh, who are today billionaires and who have never disclosed that their wealth was derived from their patriarch, who was a Southern iron baron and made millions of dollars by enslaving 255 Black people in the South. I mean, at the time, he was one of the single largest enslavers in the history of the United States. What did the family do? They invested that money, which they made from not paying Black people and working Black people to death. They invested that money into iron, into steel, and into industry, such that their family's now billionaires. Okay. Right. They're sitting in Pittsburgh, never acknowledged this history. But I recently spoke with a young man in North Carolina who has traced that he is the descendant of Black people that the Hillmans enslaved. He has told me that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of Black Hillmans in Kentucky and in Alabama. My point being that you can concretely show that there are people alive today who are attached to this history, both the living white Hillmans whose wealth they're still enjoying, and Black Hillmans, or this young man who has a different name, but whose family he can trace back to that time. Reparations, it's a living issue.
I mean, that's astonishing. That's the beauty of your book. I mean, and trust me, y'all got to get the book. Look, I ain't supposed to do this, but I'm doing it. Buy the book now. We're going to discuss Drake and Kendrick. If y'all buy 2 copies to 5 copies, we're going to discuss Drake and Kendrick. I'm going to give you the backdrop to it. I might spit a few lyrics for you. When the rim is in the system, ain't no telling, will I love him, will I diss him? That's what we're going to do. But you got to buy Montero's book, man, because it is that dope. It is brilliant. And if you get in arguments with people, and I want you to talk about this, who go like, why are you still trying to, that's the past. It has no impact on the present. You laid out one particular family, and you do this many times in this book. You trace it. It's astonishing in terms of families, institutions. I mean, all these big banks that won't give Black people their damn loans. You done took all our money. We wouldn't have to borrow the damn money if you didn't take the money. Okay, that's a personal moment for me in Bank of America. Sorry. Let me stop. So the point is that the absorption of this capital, the way in which human capital was exploited, financial capital was generated on the backs of Blacks, as Toni Morrison speaks about it. Hey, Toni, she's back here. So the point is, though, that the beneficiaries are the very ones who are telling us, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Bro, you were born on third base, think you hit a triple. You know, you were born in the lap of luxury. Now, we're not saying all white people are rich. We're saying the collective enterprise of enslavement yielded entire industries, economic beneficiaries, and tremendous wealth that allowed the culture to generate and sustain itself. And talk to us about the cultural, not simply the financial consequences, the cultural places we are now where we're trying to ban history, where I would suspect some, Ron DeSantis ain't trying to read the stolen wealth the stolen wealth of slavery, bro. He ain't trying to read that. So talk to us, put on your other, the element of your journalist hat and talk about the kind of ways in which the culture is trying to deny and suppress that knowledge because it would implicate people right now. All that argument about, oh, that's a long time ago is baloney. And the great Abraham Yashua Heschel, the great rabbi, said, not all are guilty, but all are responsible. So talk to us about why they're trying to get rid of that history.
Yeah, well, especially if we can continue to, pigeonhole Southern enslavement as having been something in the South. It's an easy history to disappear. Well, that's not, especially if you're in the North. That's not our history. That's Southern history. If you really look at the flow of wealth, you follow the money, which I'm trying to do in this book. It's an undeniable flow of North to South, benefiting and fertilizing the financial institutions and not the political institutions. I mean, how many of the men that I talk about gave to political campaigns, funded racism, built the museums that we all know and enjoy, including in Washington and New York. So it becomes very easy to dismiss this history when it's still pigeonholed in the South like that. But if you actually begin to look at it as a flow of wealth, you have to start saying, well, okay, where did it end up? And if it ended up in the world that we now live in, and we have living links to that, families we've just mentioned, institutions we just mentioned, you have to grapple with the fact that we're still benefiting from this system. And how are we going to atone for that? Because another thing I mentioned in the book is, the way that enslavement ended, so to speak, created a culture of amnesia. And that's why we're seeing these books easily banned. Especially, let's be honest, no white person in America was ever held to account for anything they did in enslavement, right? There were no trials, there was no Nuremberg. All the Confederates were basically pardoned in the end. We sort of know that. What we also don't talk about is how all these northern white men they didn't even have to face the possibility of prosecution. They didn't even need a pardon. So it created, when the Civil War ended and we just pardoned all these people, it created a culture of amnesia. Not a single moment of reckoning about the money that was made, the people responsible, especially in the North. And so we are still living in this culture of amnesia. The fundaments of which were to forgive and forget, forgive and forget. Well, who is supposed to forgive and forget? Black people are supposed to forgive and forget what happened for centuries. So yeah, I mean, and it's insane to see what's happening, that in 18 states, conservative lawmakers have proposed bills to ban the teaching of this history. Forget my book, just the basic history about enslavement.
Yeah, no, it is. This is, they're off their rockers, right? To coin a philosophically acute phrase.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And the late Gore Vidal talked about living in the United States of amnesia. And I would say that Barbra Streisand supplies the theme song. I know you young people, it's not Taylor Swift, it ain't Beyonce, all right? But Barbra Streisand, go look her up. She just wrote a 1,000-page, memoir. Might take you another year to read it, but that's all right. After you read Montero's book, go read her book. But she sang a song written by two brilliant songwriters. What's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. Choose to forget. Amnesia is the choice. Michael Rogan talks about political demonology, the deliberate dismembering as Toni Morrison talked about it. The refusal to remember. It is a choice. It is not something that happens organically where people hit their heads on a collective historical rock and can't remember. This is the choice to deny. Let's not talk about Ruby Bridges. Let's not talk about Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Let's eradicate and lie and distort. Let's not read Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye. That's part and parcel of the same culture that would create such enormous trillions and trillions of dollars of wealth and deny the legitimate claims that Black people and others might be heir to. Now, look, we've only got a few minutes left. You have a partner. I don't want to be inappropriate. I'm about to say something, but I want to make sure. Do you have a wife or a partner?
My wife is not in earshot, so
she's not in earshot. Good.
Okay.
We're gonna auction Brother Montero out. If you buy 10 books tonight, no, 20. He's too good looking. 20 books. Then he's gonna have dinner with you. I'll come join him. I'll come join him. I'll come join him. And then we're gonna hang out with y'all. Y'all buy 20 books, we're gonna have a dinner and we're gonna hang out and talk. But talk to us about the subtitle of the book is A Case for Reparations, and it's brilliantly done. And it takes all of that, even if you do such an enormously, in the most beautiful and sublime way, exhaustive job of getting us there. Talk to us about the moral and the philosophical and the economic argument for reparations.
Yeah, and I mean, the subtitle of the book is A Case for Reparations, because obviously Black people have been making the case for reparations for a very long time. But what I wanted to do was, amplify that discussion by showing the role that corporations have to play in this entire debate. And, there's some complexity to that, because I just want to point out, I'm not saying that corporations, especially the big banks, should be at the forefront of reparations and not the federal government, right? I mean, reparations have to be an initiative that is spearheaded by the federal government, but corporations also have a huge role to play in addressing this wound, starting with acknowledging it. Because, as I point out in the book, there are probably three or four at most corporations in America to date that have ever even acknowledged that they benefited from enslavement. So, I mean, which I find a mind-boggling fact, that it's not even, we're not even talking about offering apologies. We're not talking about corporations outlining a program for actual repair and reparations. We're just talking about them acknowledging that we were complicit in enslavement. Almost none of them have. So, yeah, what I wanted to do with this book is make that argument that the vestiges of this wealth are institutionalized in big banks and not just the banks. I don't want to say just the banks, but in a corporate structure that is benefiting many people in America. It's concrete wealth that we can trace. And so if we can point to them as being the beneficiaries and the vessels of this wealth, then there is a bigger conversation about how this wealth still lives and how we need to address how it was made.
Right.
Namely by paying reparations to Black people. Yeah.
Yeah, no. It's so important. Look, Fan will take you up on the 20 book offer. Right. So we got a date with with the Fan people, bro. We're gonna go out and wherever you live. I don't want you to announce it there because I don't want people beating down your door. But I'll be coming to Chicago soon. I don't know. So the point is, we're gonna hang out and we're gonna honor that when they buy those 20 books. That's beautiful. Now, talk about you mentioned this, and it's a very important. It's not just the banks. Talk about other institutions, right? Yeah. People will be surprised that benefited, that accumulated wealth, that generated surpluses that were on the backs of enslavement in America.
Well, I mean, yeah, there are fantastic historical accounts that talk about how much enslaved people were involved in industry, in iron. There's a family that's based in Chicago, the McCormick family, who, their money was derived from enslavement, and they invested it into machines. That machine company is now a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. I mean, that transformation is the story of America, right? How these families took that wealth and transmuted it into other things. But I mean, it's railroads, it's coal mines, it's the Pennsylvania coal fields, it's steel, it's banks. I mean, the Lehman Brothers, after enslavement ended, the Lehman Brothers, in case anybody doesn't know, made almost all their money from enslavement and cotton. And when enslavement ended, they made a lot more money in a new thing called convict leasing and plowed all kinds of money into that. So, I mean, the breadth of industries that enslaved people were creating wealth from, it was bricks, it was gin, it was whiskey, it was indigo, it was sugar, it was rice, it was corn. I mean, it was the bounty of wealth that America was producing at that time. And that has seeped into, yeah, so many things. You can trace, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C.'s Corcoran collection comes from W.W. Corcoran, who made his money from enslavement. I mean, this has just seeped into so many layers and facets of our culture and our body politic.
Yeah.
I just want to say, recently I was talking to somebody. He was a white guy, and he was saying, I just don't understand how reparations are going to work. And I wanted to say to him, bro, it's not up to you, right?
Right.
Thank God, like. Better minds than yours are going to figure this out. It's not your responsibility. No one's looking to you to figure out. The fact that you cannot figure out how reparations are going to work is immaterial, right? I mean, get out of the way was, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's important, and as James Brown would say, let a real man do the popcorn. but the point is, or generate the popcorn. So, but the point is, right. I talked in my book, Tears We Cannot Stop, about IRAs, individual reparations accounts. Look, you're a white person, you see something going on, you ain't got to wait for the government. There are 20 kids that need computers in your neighborhood, and you got enough money. Hook them up. I mean, right? Now, that's not a substitute for a broad discursive engagement with a profoundly, enormously important subject, but if you feel a sense of hopelessness in the face of it, then do something right where you are. But more broadly, can we have Congress study it? Can we have people look at it, what it will look like? Maybe it will look like, look, let's just have Black people not pay income tax for the next 50 years. Lord Jesus, that would help me. Okay. And people say, well, you're rich or you're wealthy and you Black people and Oprah and so on. Guess what? Jackie Robinson's kids didn't get a break because they were rich. Guess what? Rich Black people didn't get the benefit. Oh, you're a rich Negro, as we were then called. Therefore, we're not going to impose upon you the scurrilous restraints that we arbitrarily conjure in the name of an idiotic and adolescent kind of penalty of race. We have a white water fountain and a black one. Nah. You can't drink at it, right? So it's not like Black people were exempt from that. So wealth was not the issue. Money was not the issue. It was race and it was color. And so in the few minutes we have left then, what do you want people to do when they read this book, right? When they put this book down, besides, say you're a genius, what do you want them to say? What do you want them to say, like, after they read the book? Is there an action-oriented agenda? Is it critical consciousness restored and therefore become better citizens? What do you want?
Yeah, I think, it's a mindset change. I would like, first and foremost, the old story about slavery in the South, throw it away, and that leads you on the path to understanding the wealth that is around you. Yeah, I would like people to engage with reparations. At talks I've been giving, a lot of, especially older white people, were coming up to me and saying, I had no idea. You really opened my eyes. I thought slavery was something in the South, had nothing to do with me. Yeah, I would like for them to then go and, what are the reparations groups in your area? Consider giving money to them, supporting those groups in some way. But more importantly, be open to the discussion, open to the idea, and don't just close it down by saying, I don't understand how it's going to work. And am I going to have to pay out of my, you're not going to have to pay out of your pocket.
Right,
no one's coming for your business or your money. You're not going to be responsible for paying the reparations. So I want people to come to the issue of reparations with a different mindset, an open mindset, and then they decide from there how they want to engage with it.
Right. No, that would be a tremendous advantage and a tremendous difference, because so many people are resistant and in honesty, some, they're ignorant about it, or they're afraid, or you're going to take something from my table and my plate and it's unfair. Even though when people tell me I wasn't here, so I didn't benefit, and I go like, yo, you might not have been at the beginning of the train. You didn't get on in Washington, D.C., but you got on in Philadelphia and you ride that damn train to New York. Okay.
Yes.
So you still got a meal, all right, in first class, and you're still riding on a train that was put into order before your existence, but from which you benefit. All right. No, it's a remarkable book. I know we're out of time right now, and Sister Lonnie's gonna come back on, but it's a remarkable book. Please, y'all, buy this book. It is eye-opening, it is revealing, it is astonishing. We're gonna hang out and go out on a date with somebody, 20 people who bought the book. We're gonna hang out with y'all. I'm gonna keep my word. I'll fly in. We're gonna hang out. But this brother right here, David Montero, tremendously brilliant, insightful, analytically sharp book, but a compelling moral case as well. So go out and check it out. I'll turn it back over to Miss Lonnie right now.
Oof. Well, I'm not quite sure where to start there. David, we echo everything Professor Dyson says about the book. It's just fabulous. Love both the incredible detail and careful analysis that you did, as well as there is just so much heart on every page. Thank you so much for that service, 100%. Want to remind folks, we're going to do after hours with both of these gentlemen. You can come ask your own questions. You can turn on your camera. You can disagree. You can agree. You can do a round of applause, whatever you want. How do you get to come to after hours? You buy a copy, just one copy, buy a copy of David's book. You got to buy it from our bookseller. We've been putting the link in chat this whole time. We'll throw it in there one more time. In the email receipt back from our bookseller, the bookstall, you'll see there's a registration link for after hours. Come hang out. Fan is going to gift a second copy of the book to everybody who comes to after hours. So you'll have one. It's a buy one, get one free. It's what a deal. We are going to keep Professor Dyson. We cannot wait to, and I don't know, we got to figure out, we got to get David here as well. I mean, it's the two of you at dinner. It's easy for me to say, yes, we'll buy 20 copies separate from the copies we're already buying. We're going to buy more, 20 more. I mean,
we're going to get there. We'll come in and have dinner.
If you knew me, but we might not have made that offer. All right, so now I'm going to ask one question here because we got one question. We do, and because people, how come they're not asking all the audience questions? Because we all want you to come to after hours. We want you to ask the questions there. I'm going to ask a question from Tanisha because I happen to know her and I love her. Tanisha is asking, how are people from these families that you named reacting to the facts outlined in your book? I'm sure they're thrilled. It seems that we are in a place that reparations should not just be something expected from the federal government, but from corporations and institutions. David?
Yeah, it is remarkable to note that at this time of soul searching around the issue of reparations and enslavement and its legacy, we've seen so many universities and even religious institutions grapple with this history. Princeton, Harvard, they've written reports. At least they're grappling with this history. As I mentioned, corporations, almost nothing. They've not acknowledged this. And I will point out the family that I mentioned, the Hillman family of Pittsburgh, they're great. They have 18 philanthropies. They give out a lot of money every year. They are committed to civic engagement and poverty reduction, all these very, very, noble ideals and issues. You would think that they would want to embrace this. I wrote to them several times as I was writing the book and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm, talking about the patriarch of the family and how the wealth of the family today derived from enslavement. It seems very fitting, with your organization's mission. If you would talk about this they wanted nothing to do with me. Recently, an NPR affiliate in Pittsburgh did reach out to the family. They did the NPR affiliate did a story about my book and the family, the Hellmans. They issued a very bland. Again, I thought this is an opportunity for the family. The statement that they issued was so just non-committal. There was no apology. They basically said, like hundreds of thousands of other families in the antebellum period, we relied on slave labor. And no. Your family built one of the single largest enslaved labor forces in the history of the country. You did not rely on like it fell out of the sky,
right?
Slave labor. So they're billionaires. They're indicative of a mindset that doesn't want to look at this history and continues to just get away with not looking at it.
Is that Hellman's mayonnaise? Is that
No. Oh
No,
man,
okay.
no.
Not
No.
Hellman. Careful there. No, not Hellman's. I mean, I don't know about the Hellmans. I guess.
okay? Okay.
So-
Yeah, I should look that up. But no, Hillman, not
Oh, Hillman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I got sandwiches on my mind. Sorry, bro.
There you go. Okay. Well, after hours is coming. You're allowed to eat it after hours. So you're there as a guest. So both these gentlemen will be at after hours. We're at 8 o'clock. So it means we're finishing off. Professor Dyson, I just texted you your after hours link in case you're going to be poking around looking for that.
All
David
right.
just
Oh, I
resent.
just got it. Oh, medical marijuana. How sweet of you. That's amazing. Oh my God.
This is going to be a good after hours. Wow.
Great after hours, I can see that. And David, I resent you to your, well, I won't say what account, but I sent it to your account that you got the one that you're on right now.
Oh, okay.
Everybody, we'll see in about 5 minutes, 8:05, give or take. We are going to open up after hours. We're going to let these gentlemen have 5 minutes to compose.
Yeah, we'll hit David at his website, makeimpay.com. All right.
He doesn't have a website. I wish he had a website. You can
All
find
right,
David on LinkedIn. If you're like, how do I get that guy a message? LinkedIn is how to find David. All right, we're done. Thanks, gentlemen. Good job.
Thank you so
In
much.
5 minutes.
All right.
Don't get lost, either one of you.